Hey there, welcome to a We Attempt New Things Behind the Scenes vlog. Here I talk about video updates, production, some life stuff, and whatever else is on my mind. Today's topics are: I don't understand YouTube, how I should handle the upcoming The Point of Youtbue videos, what comes after The Point of Youtbue and future One Piece videos, and I'll wrap up talking about why I'm going on a short break. Let's get into it. First off, I don't understand YouTube. So, the first Point of Youtbue video made it to 5,000 views, and that's amazing. I'm floored by the support. I'm so thankful that there's been such a positive response. Thank you so much. However, parts 2 through to 4 obviously haven't been anywhere near that popular, though I'm still thrilled. I've gotten such positive feedback, positive comments. I'm really glad that some people are enjoying the series. However, what I want to understand is, why is that different? Why are they so different? Like, I don't get it. I don't get it. You see this question mark? I don't get it. So the tags are mostly the same. I change them up depending on the characters that show up. The thumbnails, obviously, very similar. Even retention statistics for the videos are quite similar, where about 50% of the video is viewed, which I'm not sure if that's good or not. It just is. And it just makes me wonder, how does YouTube's algorithm work? Is it because there's a number in the video title? Is it because the first video's title was a bit more clickbaity, where it says, "The greatest introduction in all of manga," and then the following parts are, "Zoro and the Marines," and "The Thief and the Jester," "The Man in the Chest," should have said, "This man has solved all of One Piece. This determines what the One Piece is, the story of Gaimon." I'm not going to do that. I'm not a fan of clickbaity videos. They kind of annoy me myself. I know that's how the game is played. I don't want to play that game. But yeah, frankly, I can't figure out why the follow-up videos have done so poorly. And it's not that I'm like, man, this was my big chance at a YouTube career. I've got a full-time job. I'm fine. I enjoy making these videos. This is a hobby for me. But it's a shame because I don't want people that enjoyed the first part to miss out on the other videos in the series. Like, a lot of the comments were in that first video, "Hey, I'm enjoying this first part, can't wait to see part 2. And if they're not getting recommended part 2 because of something in the algorithm, it sucks that they've missed it, and I don't want them to. So, yeah, that I don't understand YouTube. It's weird, it's strange. Oh well. But yes, the Point of Youtbue. So for the future 3 arcs, so Usopp, Baradier, and Syrup Village / Arling Park, I am torn, because I'm not sure if I split those videos in 2, so I do like one episode for the setup and the other half of the fight, i.e. so Baradier, for example, it would be setting up when we meet Sanji, when we meet Red Shoe Zeph, when we first see Don Krieg, and all of that sort of stuff. The meeting of Oni, also Johnny and Yosaku. And then the second half would be like the confrontation with Mihawk, Nami stealing the ship, the fight with Don Krieg. The alternative is I stop framing things like I have been for the last couple of parts as a story recap. So like how I did for Orange Town and Gaimon. But instead I do what I did for the first 2 parts, where I focus predominantly on the characters, the world building, and the themes. And I think those first 2 videos, they were a bit tighter because, one, I wrote them both at the same time, so I was in the same mindset when I wrote them, and I also had a bit more time to write the scripts, so I could write it more holistically, while parts 3 and 4, I kind of used the story as a framing device for the other points. So yeah, like I said, I'm torn. So on one hand, focusing on characters, world building, and themes means I can make the scripts more lean. It'll reduce the risk of needing to put together a 30-minute video in 2 weeks, which was very difficult. And the odds are that the videos are going to be getting longer and longer and longer because the arcs are getting longer and longer. On the other hand, the longer the arcs become, it's going to be harder to sort of compress it into those key points without it feeling disjointed and without me feeling the need to explain the context of actions. So if we just take, let's say Sanji, for instance, if I was to talk about in the Baratie arcs, let's talk about Sanji and let's talk about his introduction, and this is him now, and then then his confrontation with Pearl and what that means, and then we're going to talk about the end of the arc and what makes him decide to join Luffy's crew. And then we go back to the start of the story, and now we talk about Zeph. And then we follow that, and then we go back to the start of the story, we talk about Nami's journey in that story. And I'm like, yes, on one hand, following the story means the videos will be longer, and I might have to split them, but on the other hand, if I don't follow the story in the way that I have been, where I can talk about an action that occurs in the story and what that means to the different characters interacting with that action, it will feel more disjointed if I talk about that action with one character in their section and then talk about a second character and so on and so forth. It's a legitimate case of let me know in the comments what you think, because I'm not sure if people would prefer more in-depth videos, longer videos that are split in two, or shorter, more focused videos that don't talk about the story. Or character moments within the flow of the story would be more appropriate to say. So, yeah, legitimately, let me know what you think. But once we reach the end of East Blue, which would be actually after Logtown and once they complete, for lack of a better term, Reverse Mountain. So it means we stop just before we meet Laboon. And the reason for that is Reverse Mountain, the crew have literally left the East Blue at this point. So if I have a series called The Point of East Blue and they're no longer on the East Blue, that's kind of weird. I also think Logtown or Roguetown is really neat, and it serves as a great introduction to the world outside of the East Blue. And so while the live action series might be using Logtown as their prologue to the Grand Line, I like it more as a wrap-up of the East Blue, and it's like, okay, you've finished this small corner of the ocean, but now you're meeting the big players. You see Dragon for the first time. You see Smoker, who's, I think he's the highest ranked admiral you see at that point, aside from technically Garp during the cover pages. And you're seeing this is the world. You've seen the start of the journey to where the Pirate King was executed, and it's like, oh, now the prologue of One Piece is over, and now the full story can begin. And also Buggy shows up again. And I love Buggy. If you haven't seen part 3, Buggy is my guy. Buggy is the actual Pirate King. Fight me. I'm going to have a video on that. But yeah, so that's where I want to finish. But after The Point of East Blue, the series is finished, what do I do? So there's definitely 1 or 2 more episodes of my issues with the One Piece live action, or should I say 1 episode of my issues with the One Piece live action, and then a second video which is the community's issues with live action. Because, like I've said previously, lots of comments, lots of people sharing their opinions about live action, and I really just want to go through them. Some of the ones that have been repeated a lot and really dissect them and be like, hey, is this a valid criticism? Is this actually something? And maybe even going into some of the arguments, some of the back and forths that have been happening, where the one that springs to mind immediately, when people say, well, Nami actually does steal from civilians. She steals from the villagers in Syrup Village. And then other people say, well, no, she stole from their wallets as like a gesture of who she was. And it's like, she'll be fine. She's still like the sharp girl that she's always been. And plus she left them all this money anyway. So it's like, really, she gave them 100 million berries and then she took 50 berries. So, but yeah, going deep into that and like, okay, does Nami actually steal from civilians? So that would be interesting, but that is going to take a while to write. The other thing I want to do in relation to live action is doing a video on what I think the next season or 2 of the live action One Piece series should be, because I'm worried that they're going to skip stuff. And I want to almost get ahead of the game here and be like, okay, you're going to be adapting. I hope they don't try to adapt all of Logtown and all of the Baroque Works saga. I think that would be complete foolishness, and they would have to cut so much. And that's why I want to do a video of like, hey, this is what season 2 should cover. And spoilers, I think season 2 of the One Piece live action series should stop once they reach Alabasta, and then they have an entire series on Alabasta. That should be season 3. Because there's so much in the journey to Alabasta that is so important. And it also makes it so Vivi actually has more of a presence. Like, it's one thing like Kobe hangs around for the entirety of the first season, then hopefully we won't see him in season 2 or 3. I seriously hope we don't. Because I feel like season 2 is going to be Smoker chasing them, even though that still doesn't make sense either. But Vivi being there for a whole season and then a second whole season, and that the end of that second Alabasta season leaving the crew would have a lot more emotional weight than rushing through the entire season and then Vivi says bye. Because the thing I know that they would cut if they finish with Alabasta is Dory and Broggy won't survive. They will get chopped to pieces, and that essentially means that Usopp doesn't have a reason to exist. Dory and Broggy is so integral to Usopp's character development and his goals in the story that if they are cut from the live action, they might as well cut Usopp entirely, frankly. Like, it's... So they can't miss that. And that's what I want to make a video on. Like, you can't cut this. You can't skip over this. Like, you already cut my sweet octopus boy. Don't do any more damage, please. But yes, after the point of East Blue and then maybe after those videos, do I continue working on a similar series where I deep dive into the One Piece manga? And I would love to, frankly. I'd love to do the entirety of One Piece, even up to its conclusion when that day eventually comes. But with Alabasta specifically, I'd have to rejig the premise. So I can't call it the point of Baroque Works. And a deep dive into the Baroque Works saga, it's not snappy enough. It's too long of a title, and it doesn't flow in an intro. I think the point of East Blue is great because it helps me write my video descriptions, and it also is like, oh, and here we discover what is the point of East Blue, and it's like a sentence that you can intro card on, and I need something like that for Baroque Works. Graphics-wise, I also really want to match the title card and the thumbnail to match what is in the original anime as well, like what I've kind of done for Season 1, albeit it isn't animated, but I want to try and make the future seasons of my deep dives have animated intros to match those in-between cards, except obviously featuring my blob, so that would be super fun. And I also want to update my blob's outfits to match Luffy's outfits, because I think that would be really cute, and that way the graphics won't get too stagnant. But yeah, I'm definitely keen to do it. I've been thinking of what I'd focus on, like how to set up a villain. How is Crocodile introduced? What does the story tell us about leadership? Because while the East Blue was all about different kinds of pirates and different kinds of pirate leadership, should I say, and all about dreams, and there's a big thing about personal treasure, the Baroque Works saga is all about leadership. You see the leadership of Crocodile is like how he leads Baroque Works, then Vivi as the Princess of Alabasta. And then you also see it really pointed at during the Drum Island arc, where it's Vivi's ideal of leadership versus, I've forgotten his name, Wapol. Wapol's vision of leadership and how she's trying to rescue her people and she's doing her best for her people while Wapol takes the resources for himself and abandons his people. And that's really the big focus of the Baroque Works saga. And obviously, in the same way that there's Oda's introducing the world of One Piece, the Baroque Works saga is how does Oda introduce the Grand Line, like the creatures, the weather, the islands, etc. My biggest concern, though, continuing on the series, is setup and payoff. And because Oda is really good at this, but he hasn't started doing it so much yet in the East Blue. There's some stuff, like the Buggy's flashback, you see Rayleigh. And there'll be some other stuff with Arlong Park. But it's hyper-focused in the East Blue, getting that core of the story ready. But once we hit the Grand Line, that's when Oda's like, all right, time to drop hints about things that won't be relevant in the story for several hundred chapters. For instance, all of this stuff involving Sanji's lineage. And it's like, I'm from the West Blue. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Oh, call me Mr. Prince. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And so while I've occasionally dipped my toes in referencing future story material, most blatantly when I was talking about the Celestial Dragons, when I was talking about how Gaimon's Island is not God Valley, that's going to be harder to do because there's more hints and more lore drops that are more blatant, I guess I would say, for One Piece readers that are knowledgeable about what happens in the future. Because here's the thing, I framed and would like to continue to frame this series, or these multiple series of each arc or saga, as what does a first-time reader notice when they read the story carefully? Like, how does One Piece reward a careful reader? And I don't want, and getting bogged down on theory crafting and future references, it doesn't work well with that concept. But that said, I can't empty my brain of all of my One Piece knowledge. I'm up to date. I occasionally dip my toes into theory videos. Not as often. I love reading the chats happening on the Discord when each new chapter gets released. That's always good fun. I love the agenda pushing. I'm a One Piece fan. I'm part of the One Piece community. I enjoy it thoroughly. And I know if I'm continuing on with the series into the Grand Line, that the comments will mention things that I don't mention. So, for instance, if I don't explicitly say, Sanji is Mr. Prince, or he calls himself Mr. Prince, and that means that is a reference to how he's actually a Vinsmoke, and this, that, and the other, the comments are going to mention that for me. So, if I don't mention it, I don't want the comments to be bogged down with, oh, didn't you know that this is a reference to this? It's like, yes, I do know, but the whole conceit of these series of videos is that I'm reading it as if I don't. But my medium is kind of doing what I already do, which is where I point it out explicitly, but I don't reference what it's pointing to. So, referring to Sanji again, I'd say, now Sanji has decided to use the alias of Mr. Prince. Is that because he views himself as a handsome prince rescuing maidens, or is there something more to that name? Keep it in mind, or something to that effect. I'll use the phrase, keep it in mind, as my, this will be on the test later. Don't forget this. The other thing I don't want to be bogged down on is real-world references. I think One Piece is a universal story, and while its roots are obviously Japanese, it draws from so many different mythologies and different cultures to build its world, and that's what makes One Piece so amazing. But if I'm just some kid picking up One Piece for the first time, regardless of what culture I'm growing up in, I'm not going to understand or know these cultural references. I'm not going to know that a character design is a reference to this character or this actor from this story, and so we can guess what might happen to this character because of the story that is referencing. So, for instance, the Admirals, they are all, if I'm remembering off the top of my head correctly, these videos are like, I've got dot points and then I ad-lib, so I haven't got any research in front of me, but the Admirals, a couple of them are based off of, or if not all of them, are based off of old Yakuza movies from, I don't know which time period, like 60s, 70s, 80s, and they've got famous actors that were, like, they play these Yakuza types. And I remember seeing some theories where they're like, oh, because this character is based off of this actor who played this character in this movie, we can assume that his storyline is going to be like this. And that's what I don't want to become. I don't want to see a character and then have to be like, this character is based off of this thing, and that means this is going to happen. Because when I first stumbled across One Piece, way back in like 2005, I didn't know that. I was, gosh, how old was I? I probably would have been 11-ish. I wouldn't have understood any of these references. And Oda is such a great storyteller, you don't need to know the surrounding cultural references to enjoy the story. That's why I think One Piece is a universal story. It doesn't matter what culture you're in. If you're from a Western country, if you're from England, America, Australia, or if you're someone that's reading a translation in a different Asian country from Japan, if you're Korean, if you're Chinese, or if you're reading it from like entirely different continent, if you're from Brazil, if you're from an African country, You can enjoy that's what I truly believe. I think you can enjoy One Piece. That's why it's one of the most popular stories on Earth. So that's why I'm not going to talk about that sort of thing when I talk about characters being introduced. It's the same reason I try and use the official translations, even though they aren't great, especially some of the ones from the early chapters. I know they aren't the best, and they aren't the most accurate, but if you are a new One Piece reader, if you've gone to your library to borrow a book and you see One Piece and you open it up, or if you go to a bookstore and you see the manga, a hard copy of the manga, and you're like, oh, let me check this out, it's got a lot of volumes, and you start reading it, you're going to be reading the official translation. And so that's what I think the average first-time One Piece reader is going to read. And hell, I started with the 4Kids dub, and don't give it up, Luffy, dream it. Don't give it up, Zolo, dream it. Don't give it up, Nami. Okay, let's stop. But yeah, I started with the 4Kids dub, and I still love One Piece. So I think it doesn't matter where you start. Obviously, don't watch the 4Kids version, even if the opening is a banger. But yeah, the official translation is what I'm going to try and use. What was I talking about? My concerns going forward. So I guess to handle that foreshadowing stuff that becomes so prevalent in Grand Line One Piece, I will create maybe a setup and payoff chart where I won't reference the payoff until it happens, but I'll acknowledge something is being set up. So it could be a fun thing to add as part of the framework for each episode, where I go characters, themes, world building, and then chart updates. So it'd be a good way to acknowledge straight up world building, like when we meet Dory and Brogy, we're like, hey, giants exist. But on the setup and payoff chart, I'll be like, Usopp is inspired by the giants and wants to visit Elbaf. Or yeah, Usopp has a relationship with the giants, and that's like, okay, this is set up. We don't know what that's paying off yet. I might know, but as a first-time reader, I don't know. But let's keep that in mind. My final concern, obviously, is the length. The Alabasta Saga is, thankfully, several shorter stories: Whiskey Peak, Dory Brogy, Drum Island, Alabasta. But after that, we move on to Skypiea. And Skypiea is just one big story. So when we move on to Water 7, it's technically Water 7 and Enies Lobby, but then we're on to, and Foxy's arc, Long Ring, Long Land. I always forget the name of that too. And then we're on to Spooky, Scary Skeleton Land, whose name escapes me. Good golly. And we meet Brook. And those are they aren't split up anymore. They're just one big story. So I will have to figure out how to write the scripts in a way that go into the sort of detail that I've been able to go through with previous chapters, but where I don't have to awkwardly cut them off, that I can still cover it arc by arc. So yeah. Gosh, this is 23 minutes already. This is what happens when I don't have a firm script to do, though, not much editing in this, and my lip movements never match, so. So I just looked at my character on my second screen here, and I'm like, yep. Lip movements. I never got that right. So, okay, what was my final topic? The reason I'm making this video, I'm going on break. I am going on a holiday with my honey, with my wife. So this video and the next one, I don't want to be videoless. I don't want to not post anything for a month. But I am going to pre-record, obviously, this video. I'm recording a week and a bit in advance. And I'll record a second one, which will be a bit more lighthearted. I'm going to talk about some One Piece stuff, which should be more fun instead of just like vlog and production stuff. But yeah, these videos are more laid back. They require less editing, which is what eats up the bulk of my time. And this will give me enough time to not have to rush out the next couple of parts. I'll be able to invest more time in updating some graphics as well. I'm thinking of fully committing and making the ocean background that I use, making it fully loop, so that way I can potentially spend less time editing. I'm not sure. I enjoy making the videos, but obviously I have to spend sometimes a couple of hours a night for like 2 straight weeks, especially for the Nami video, which ended up being a 30-minute video. So I need to figure out how to make it more efficient, but without dropping the quality too much. So please bear with me. Part 5 of The Point of Eastblue should be out on the 26th of May or the 25th of May if you're not in Australia, because our time zone is very different. And I repeat myself, I'm not kidding about wanting feedback on how I should tackle the rest of The Point of Eastblue. So please leave your comments down below. If you've actually watched this video, that means you probably are a fan of those, and thank you so much. I do read all the comments. I've been very busy recently, so I haven't had the time to respond to all of them, but I try to heart the ones that are very nice and lovely, and yeah, I always appreciate all the comments and all the feedback. Especially the ones, there was one that was saying like, hey, you need to turn your music down, it's interrupting with the vocals with your narration. I'm like, oh, thank you. I actually, like, that sort of feedback is very valuable, so please. And the guy that pointed out that there was the line through the graphic, I fixed that, but the fact that I was like, oh no, they did notice. But yes, I always appreciate all the comments and the feedback, because it's not I attempt new things, it's we attempt new things. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a fruitful day. Have a good one. See you next time. Toodles!